Hello, everyone. I manage our Security Operations Center and security team here at Onward Technologies. I've been in the field for about 12 years. Prior to coming to Onward, my primary clients were local and tribal law enforcement, detention centers, the Office of the Attorney General, and other various legal departments. I've been responsible for helping those clients to adopt, meet, and enforce cybersecurity compliance as set forth by federal and regulatory oversight. Over the years, I've performed many forensic investigations for various law enforcement agencies, such as the Department of the Interior, the FBI, and other entities. I've been a subject matter expert in court focused on alleged intentional data destruction, and I've done numerous incident response investigations and remediations for cyber attacks such as CryptoLocker, WannaCry, and Ryuk, just to name a few. Since coming to Onward, I now help clients identify gaps in their cybersecurity defenses, working with organizations to help implement comprehensive and holistic cybersecurity planning and solutions to improve their cybersecurity defenses.
That's really interesting. Before we get started, please feel free to ask questions throughout, and we'll hold out to answer the questions until the end of the presentation. Let's talk about some cybersecurity pain points. Some of the pain points that I've seen throughout organizations through the pandemic is managing compliance, lack of resources, incident prevention. Chris, can you help elaborate on these topics?
Sure. So as Jane was saying, some of the pain points that she's seen in some of our clients have been issues with managing compliance, there being a lack of resources or staff, as well as incident response and cyber emergency preparedness. And so over time, this is one of the issues that we've been facing with operations management, is that there's no real visibility in the environments. You know, your typical way of identifying issues in standard operations are your remote management tool, which provides somewhat limited visibility in terms of what you see. You don't really get detailed security analytics out of your RMM. And so you're left to look through logs manually. And so in order to try to identify if a breach has occurred, and you're trying to identify something like Ryuk, for example, before it fully detonates. One of the challenges is identifying what system it originated on, what files were compromised, when they were compromised, how long has this advanced persistent threat been in the network, and when it comes time for remediation or response, you're left trying to manually go through logs one by one and piece together, you know, like with red yarn and thumbtacks, you know, a series of, it first talked to this machine, and then it accessed these files, and it overwrote these files. But one of the more challenging things with something like Ryuk, for example, is that they changed the dates at which the files were compromised. So you might be looking at a system and all of the files changed 3 days ago. But when you look at the file properties of it, it might say it hasn't been modified since 2018. And so you're left trying to figure out, you know, what really happened. And so unless you have a way to aggregate all of that log data, you don't really have a good way to identify where your breach occurred. And so when we talk about breaches, you know, the biggest issues that I see a lot of organizations face is that they're trying to meet these cybersecurity standards and they're trying to implement defenses, but they don't quite have all of the resources or tools available to them. In that, you know, our traditional, what I call sword and board of firewall and antivirus, you know, when you get these robust firewalls that combine multiple services, and you couple it with a good holistic antivirus. For the longest time, that's been a very acceptable way of securing your environment. But one of the things that we see is that these threats are constantly evolving. And so there's vulnerabilities constantly being identified in systems. And without some sort of proactive management in these vulnerabilities, you're opening up the surface area of attack. And so then we start looking at, how do we stay compliant? If we're a law firm that deals with the insurance industry, how do we stay compliant with these, changing cybersecurity requirements? One of the things that I've personally seen change this year is that now the wording has gone from continuous monitoring to continuous cybersecurity monitoring, meaning that these traditional ways of monitoring our environments using RMMs and using what tools we've had available that were either part of Windows or part of our MSP agreements, these things aren't sufficient any longer. And so we're seeing that organizations are primarily compliant only at audit season. And then a few months after, depending on your audit schedule, you might have biannual audits or annual audits. The organizations with annual audits tend to go out of compliance in that time after the audit up until the next one. And for the most part, when the requirements don't change, the only remediation that needs to happen is, patching of systems and, mainly, making sure that we're monitoring or retaining logs for our set number of time and things like that. And so once you can meet those compliance requirements, now you have to deal with this change of, cybersecurity monitoring. And when you get into monitoring your environment, one of the key things is staying up on who the new threat actors are, what the new malware variants are, and what they do. So what that in itself is a full-time job. Quantifying the threat intelligence that you receive is just as important as getting it in the first place. There are actors out there who will put misinformation up publicly available in hopes to deter you from getting them so quickly. The other thing is, when you get into threat intelligence, depending on your platform, if you're sharing threat data back up to the public cloud, you're showing those threat actors again whether or not their tools are working. And that's not something you want to do. So all of the same information that organizations are getting to improve their defenses, well, these threat actors are using that themselves to improve the sophistication and delivery methods of their tools. And so it becomes a big challenge trying to keep up with all of the things that are happening. And so when we look at if there's an event, and we've gotten away from that if language. It's not if there's an event, it's now when there's an event. Statistically speaking, there's a 40% chance that your organization may be affected by one of these cyber attacks. It's not a doom and gloom scenario. These are by the numbers. SonicWall put out a report this year, and the amounts of attacks are going up, but not in the spaces you would assume. So typical malware attacks are going down, but you're seeing attack vectors such as IoT becoming a more prevalent issue. And so what's important is making sure that you have the right policies in place to prepare for such an attack. If you're not testing your plans at least once preferably annually, then you have no real proof that your methods for disaster recovery and incident response would actually work. If you don't have an identified escalation tree in the event of a cyber emergency, everybody tends to run around like chickens with their heads cut off. It can lead to very unfortunate consequences for the business in terms of how long it takes to actually get back up and running. I think the most popular number I've seen, and I can't say it's an actual official number, but the estimate for prevention is preventing cyber attacks save about 1.4 million on average. So that's factoring in the cost for paying the ransom if you're double targeted, bringing in experts to perform forensics, identify the source of the breach, the type of malware, and actually remedy the environment. And so when you think about it, one of the last responses I did when I was at Ryuk, as part of our whiteboard discussion at the end, we factored out, what is your actual loss of dollars in revenue? Because this is important to know. How much does it cost your organization to be down every hour? And then when you look at, the average time to remediation can be anywhere from 1.5 to 4 days, and depending on the complexity, right? When the Garmin attack happened a couple months ago, they were down for almost 2 weeks. I don't think they fully released the amount of damages that were caused financially, but it was quite substantial. And so a lot of organizations are trying to meet these requirements, and so they'll implement a SIM to get that log retention tick mark met. They'll throw 1 or 2 bodies at watching this SIM and looking for alerts that may occur. But one of the issues is a lot of these SIMs are you get what you get, and there's no real customization tailored towards your organization. And so when we're talking about compliance and meeting those standards, you really need to partner with an organization who understands your needs and will take time to build your security solution around your environment and your unique needs. And so I've talked to a lot of organizations that they're like, yeah, we're doing a lot of this stuff. It's like, okay, well, what's your 24-hour incident response look like? And I've gotten, well, we have cell phones. Well, that's great in order to reach them, but after 5 p.m. and up until 4 or 5 a.m. the next day, who's monitoring those events? What if your SIM's not fully tuned and you're missing alerts on critical things? Having humans actually watching the environment makes a big difference, and assuming that there's always a risk is what can potentially stop that spread of an advanced persistent threat when they notice that resource usage is out of the ordinary, or administrator account is being attempted at odd hours where it normally doesn't. And so some of the clients I've talked to, they look at, well, why don't I build a SOC? Well, you could, and depending on the size of your enterprise, after a certain point, it makes sense to build your own, but unless you're spending well over, $2 million a year on your cybersecurity, it doesn't make any sense. Most SOCs at a minimum require 12 full-time staff to fully operate and be somewhat efficient. Now, when you talk about, a large enterprise and a large number of assets, that total is going to be even larger. Some of the threat intelligence subscriptions, for example, are incredibly expensive. So just the same as the tools involved. So trying to do it yourself is good, but it definitely has its drawbacks. And then you get into incident response. So you have your 12 people, watching and helping and monitoring, but when there's an incident, if those people aren't incident responders, who do you call? Typically, from our experience, we get brought in from organizations that have internal staff. They may have 1 or 2 cybersecurity people on staff. They may have, a dedicated help desk or IT team, but when it comes to remediating some of these advanced issues, there's a lot of times that, trying to reverse engineer something is beyond their scope. And so it helps to have a partner that has the staff and experience and breadth of expertise available to take care of those issues as they emerge. And so over the past couple of years, we've been working to identify those issues and put together a comprehensive solution that will take care of that 24/7 monitoring 365 by having humans involved with it. But we take it a step further by incorporating AI and machine learning into what we're doing. So that way, because attacks are happening at machine speed, so are responses. And so all of that data is fed to our Onward SIM. And this is how one of the ways that we help organizations meet their log retention and compliance for monitoring is your SIM is going to retain all of the logs for all of your devices, as well as cloud services and various softwares. It can also have things such as application performance monitoring, as well as security events and other critical data. And so within that platform itself, we're leveraging machine learning and AI to detect anomalies in patterns in resource usage and behavior and network traffic and all different factors of the data that we're receiving. And so we integrate with as many different products and platforms as we can, everything from the full range of Microsoft products to various other open source products and even SAP. So we have an integration with SAP HANA, for example, that will pull critical data from that. It will alert you if service goes down in your hosted portion, as well as, logs for security events and things like that. So we're covering virtually every installable operating system, every IoT operating system, every networking device OS. We try to cover every possible vector of entry. And so with our platform, you'll be able to view alerts in one location for all of the endpoints in your organization. You can see the level or severity of alerts, what specifically is going on. And you can drill down specifically by machine, by type. And one of the, I would say my favorite features is you get that real-time vulnerability monitoring. So there's some organizations that, they'll bring in an outside party to run Nessus, annually. They may have an external scan done. But what's great about this is real-time vulnerability data across your machines every day. So part of our platform that we offer is a vulnerability management solution for you. Because most staff is inundated with, keeping up with help desk triage and all of the other issues as is, it's really easy to fall behind with retaining, up-to-date patches. So our team works with you to patch those softwares and systems and maintain your overall device health. And so that gets into how we help you to maintain compliance. So we're looking at making sure that you're compliant all of the year, not just through audit season. And we build our compliance dashboards specifically for what your needs are. So if you have needs for PCI compliance at the forefront, well, you have all of the critical components that are pertinent to what you need. So we look at compliance in a three-tiered structure. So you have your frameworks, your policies, and your dashboards. And your frameworks dictate your policy, and your policies dictate your dashboards. And so we work with you to really understand what your needs are, what your needs of compliance are. And as part of our package, we offer 5 audit engagements annually. So that way we help you to make sure that you're meeting and exceeding those compliance requirements set forth by your clients. So this is an example of what, say, a NIST 800 dashboard may look like in your environment. At a glance, this is just a generic one that we threw together for the presentation. So yours wouldn't necessarily look like this unless this is what you want. We're more than happy to customize that. And so HIPAA is critical for some organizations, and not everyone, but you know, we cover HIPAA, PCI DSS, NIST 853, ISO 27001, SOC 2. So if you need to maintain or monitor your SOC 2 compliance, you have the capabilities with that as well. And so all of this is what feeds our data analytics program on the back end. And so we're looking at usage patterns of what users do within the network structure or network file structure on Windows, what their habits are on cloud services, what their habits may be with web services. And so when we see, say, an administrator signing in who, you know, may only sign in once a month, starting to sign in more frequently at hours they're not, that would trigger an alert on our end and cause the need for response of investigation. And so all of our data points are primarily focused at identifying every possible vector of data exfiltration or ingress of a malicious attacker. And so the way that we're able to provide that endpoint security is through our AutoWatch program. So AutoWatch leverages AI and machine learning to aggregate logs across all of the devices, ships that into the SIM using an encrypted channel, as well as it provides active response for something, say, like a brute force attack over RDP that may be occurring on one of your public-facing servers. It will also respond in other ways, such as killing a port for a short amount of time, blacklisting IPs, you name it. You know, the capabilities really are endless. So Onward Watch is our team of SOC analysts who work 24/7 to identify any potential threats in your network, to monitor your logs, to make sure that all of your devices are fully ingested. They do a constant discovery to try to find any new devices that may show up on your network, as well as provide that vulnerability patching and proactive security maintenance across your organization. And so our analysts are fed threat intelligence data through over 50 sources that allows them to make educated decisions in what happens or is what's happening in your environment, as well as this feeds our endpoint detection and response program to say if it's identified an IP coming from a remote attacker, it'll automatically blacklist that IP either at the local firewall level, or depending on the SOAR automation, if it's integrated with your firewall, then it would blacklist that IP at your firewall. And so we're using as much data as we can to identify the best routes for securing your environment, identifying who these threat actors are, and tying that into our overall platform for SOAR. And so what our SOAR platform, or Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response, does is it leverages those algorithms within the SIM, the incident response with the endpoint detection platform, the automation integration into your firewalls, for example, as well as your network security monitoring applications and appliances, and even your cloud services. And so what that can do is it has the capabilities of preventing, you know, attackers from maintaining a connection into the environment if there was a breach, or, you know, something as simple as blocking a port, blacklisting an IP, or as if files are starting to be propagated, it could even potentially, you know, purge those files and recover your volume shadow copy on that. depending if you wanted to go on the destructive path. So the platform really has a lot of capabilities, and we've made sure that we can integrate with virtually any platform that you may have within your organization. So that's really about all I have. You know, the key things that I've been facing with organizations is, you know, the visibility. How do we really see where our problems lie? You know, how do we really see what's going on within our environment? A lot of people may not think it's important to know, you know, what files are being changed on a daily basis, but if something like Ryu gets on the network and you see one device make file changes to every possible file on that system that it can change, that would be a massive indicator that you have an issue or an incident. And a lot of times, you know, we're very reactive at, you know, client level to security threats and not proactive. And so that's really what we're trying to achieve is proactive defenses for cybersecurity and being less reactive.